welcome back to my home studio. This is my day 40 of my quarantine distraction videos that I've been making for our students at Mason High School and for anyone else who would perhaps like a distraction of what's going on in the world and would like to just be thinking about something a little bit more pleasant and fun and like creatively working in clay. So today's video is very specific for the Ceramics 1 students at Mason High School. We still have one very important technique that we were unable to cover this spring before our buildings were closed. And I need to communicate that with the students now so they have an understanding of this technique. So if they advance to the next level of class, if they go to Ceramics 2, they will have this knowledge as background knowledge. So this technique that I'm going to be showing is working with slabs with a tar paper pattern that we use as support. Okay, now tar paper comes in long rolls. They're about 3 feet long. You can buy tar paper at any home improvement store, any hardware type of store in the United States. If they sell building supplies, they will sell tar paper. If you're not in the United States, tar paper is felted paper that has tar over it. So it actually has a smell a little bit like tar. It makes it a little less permeable to water, and tar paper goes underneath, say, shingles on a building. And it's a roofing type of material. If you ever have a construction friend who has a little bit of a tar paper roll left over, you might want to ask them for a little bit of a donation so you can try this. Tar paper comes in very big rolls, and I buy probably 2 or 3 rolls per year to split between my classes and another class, another teacher's classes. So we go through quite a bit of tar paper, but we have a lot of students. It would take an individual a very long time to go through an entire roll. Tar paper is sold in different weights. There's a heavier weight and a lighter weight, and I typically get the lighter weight because it does the job that we need it to do, and it's less expensive because you get more of the material on the roll if it's a little bit thinner. Now there's also something else that you need to be aware of. I recently discovered, I have no idea how long, maybe it's been out there for years and I just didn't notice it, that some tar paper is impregnated with fiberglass, like a fiberglass mesh. You do not want that for this. And it would still work, but the primary reason you don't want the fiberglass mesh is because as you're working with the tar paper and maybe cutting it, you'll get the little fibrous pieces in your hand, and it's not comfortable at all. Now, you can tell what has the fiberglass in it, and I have an example right here because I bought some by mistake. All right, so you might be able to see there's a slight grid pattern to this one. The grid pattern indicates that's where the fiberglass is. Maybe it's marked on it, but I certainly never noticed it being marked when I inadvertently bought it one time. Otherwise, it doesn't have a grid. Okay, like this one, it doesn't have a grid. Both of these have been used. That's why they look all messy. So just be aware of that. If you're purchasing, try to avoid the one that has any fiberglass in it. Let's talk about the advantages of why would you use tar paper if you're making a slab piece. Well, tar paper is used on the exterior of the item when you build it, which I'll show you that in just a minute. So when I built this, it had tar paper pieces all over the outside. When the clay gets leather hard, you take the tar paper off and you clean it. Now that gives you a lot of possibilities that you wouldn't be able to do as easily without the tar paper. So this form that is partially done, I have never quite finished it yet, but it's still kind of in that leather hard to dry leather hard stage. This form was made by creating a tar paper pattern, and I had the tar paper on the exterior as I built. and we will make a construction paper model before we actually assemble something. I have another video that is in 2 parts, and it's about using tar paper to create our Ceramics 1 large projects. Because I'm just trying to introduce this technique to you, I'm not going to be doing a large project. I'm just doing the small box project. And the box is going to teach you the techniques that you would need to know, and you would just transfer those to something larger. I will link the other videos. I'll put some cards here, so if you look, you'll see a pop-up right now, but I will also link them in the video description where you can see those other slightly more advanced videos with more advanced forms, but the technique is the same as what I'm going to be showing you here. When you're starting out with the slab method, you need certain materials. We are using a rolling pin. They're the long, large rolling pins that I have in my classroom. We're also going to be using slab sticks, which are hardwood sticks of a specific thickness. I'm using the red ones, which are 1/4 inch thick. You place them on either side of your clay, and notice that the wall of my piece is a 1/4 inch thick. I do have thicker ones and thinner ones, like the yellow ones are 3/8 of an inch. I'm not using those because that's not appropriate. And you would also have your tar paper cut. Begin by rolling a little bit, then picking up and flipping it and rotating it. This helps to prevent the clay from getting stuck and embedded into the canvas of the table. It helps you to roll it evenly and freely. So keep rotating it and flipping it as you go, especially if you need it to be, longer or wider. Make sure that it's fitting your pattern. Once you're totally down to the final thickness, you're going to hear the rolling pin hit the wood sticks. You'll definitely hear that sound. When it's completely in contact with the wood sticks on both sides, then you're done. I am wiping off the rolling pin before I put it back. And then the next step is, once it's rolled out, you're going to take a rib. Now, we've used these baby ribs in the past. You could use a baby one, you could use a big one. The red or the yellow usually work just fine for this. And you want to kind of go at a gentle angle when you do this. I've compared this before, like you want to think about how you're holding it gently so you're not gouging the clay. The compression is going to make the slab stronger, and you want to do it on both sides. So here I'm just kind of explaining. Remember how if you think about like you're petting a puppy's head with it, you want it to be a gentle angle so you're not jabbing it and poking it. Once you've ribbed one side, then rib the opposite side, and again the compression will make the slab a much stronger slab when you have compressed all those surface particles together. And after you've finished ribbing it, release it one final time from the canvas so it's not stuck. Now, before you put the tar paper on, this is a very important step. You're going to take a sponge and wet it, and actually wet the surface until it is shiny. You've created slip, and that slip is going to allow the tar paper to stick to the clay because you need the tar paper stuck to it. Okay, there we go. I have all my pieces on. Now, the tool that I always recommend to cut with is not a knife, but a needle tool. The reason I like the needle tool is it can ride up against the edge of the tar paper without getting caught on it and gouging it. Whereas if you take a knife, sometimes the knife blade gets caught on the tar paper. So I'm just going to cut all these out, and notice that I did place many of them pretty close together with just enough of a gap to get the needle tool through. They can be placed as close as you can as long as the needle tool can still slide through between them. Okay, I think I made all the cuts now. So I can collect the scrap, and this is when I tell my students, don't ball it up, leave it loose, and we can squirt down the scrap pieces and then put it back in a bag. Now, when you go to pick up the pieces, you want to keep the tar paper stuck to it. So you kind of pick it up gently by the edge, and remember I previously released this from the table. So the tar paper is physically stuck to it. If it's a little bit loose, you can stick it back on, and then I'm going to drop it tar paper side down. Just drop it a couple of inches, and that helps it to embed again. And I'll just set these stacked one on top of the other. Notice when I stack them, it's always tar paper to clay, tar paper to clay. All right, so I have my pieces cut out. Now I'm going to get the pieces arranged for the first box. So I set it as a blown out explosion view. So the base is in the middle, and then the walls are if they're flopped out to the outside. Okay, when I build, I'm going to be building it on top of the base. So typically we always make a construction paper model before we build out of tar paper. You make the model, make sure it's sized right, everything fits together, then you cut the tar paper pattern pieces out before you move on to clay. Now, I know that this box fits together. I don't have a construction paper model because these are just 3-inch squares. Now, I know that it's going to fit because we are always going to be building on top of the bottom, okay? Not to the side, but we build on top of the bottom. Now, there is a trick though. So if I show you this, if I put this on top of the bottom, this on top of the bottom, and this on top of the bottom, I want you to notice what's happening over here. You can see how the side is oddly sticking out off this edge. So we have to do what's called a bevel at the corners. We're going to be taking off excess clay. So I have a little wooden model here to show you as an example. So imagine we have, okay, 2 pieces of clay, and where on the outside, that's the tar paper side, okay? I want you to look at the corner where it is orange. That is an indicator of how we're going to trim. We're going to put about a 45-degree bevel on that 90-degree corner so it fits together, like in woodworking, maybe a picture frame, something like that. So this will take off the excess clay so we can build it on top of the base. Now, there are 2 different ways that you can put a bevel on it. One is by using a knife. When you bevel with a knife, we are only going to be beveling the corners that are upright. I don't bevel the bottom, I don't bevel the base of the walls, just the vertical corners. So when I go to bevel, I'm going to hold my knife at about a 45-degree angle. I make sure I watch to make sure that the knife tip is sticking out just beyond the edge of the paper as I pull it through. Now I'm going to rotate this and I'm going to do the other side. Now I'm going to mention I'm a right-handed person, so I'm holding the knife in my right hand, and notice that I'm holding it so the knife kind of comes across my body. See how it's angling to the other side. I don't try to cut it like this. That's super duper awkward, and I couldn't see what was happening because my arm is in the way. So I watch the tip of the knife. I make sure that the tip, if I hold this up so you can see it, okay, you can see that angle that's happening there. The tip sticks out just beyond the edge of the tar paper, and I have approximately a 45-degree angle. So this gives me a bevel on my sides. It doesn't matter if you're doing a piece that has sides that have curves to them, you still bevel like this because the bevels will meet up at the corners. So I'm going to do that again. Again, the tip sticks out beyond the edge of the tar paper, and then I do the opposite side, and notice I turned around the clay because again, I do that, I'm right-handed. Now, as I put these 2 together, you can see the bevels match up. It will fit on the base much better when you cut off the excess from the corners. The other way that you can cut the base is by using one of these cool fancy bevel cutter tools that we recently got in the classroom. This is a Xylem bevel cutter tool. The link for this is also in the Google Doc, which is included in the video description. Now, when you look at this, it has a couple different angles. This is a broader angle, and this is a shorter angle. I'm going to use this one. This is a 45-degree angle. This one, I'm not too sure if that's 60 or what, but I'm going to use this one, and I hold the cutter right up against the edge of the clay, okay, and I pull it towards me, and as I do that, it's automatically making a 45-degree angle cut. So you can use whichever bevel maker you choose to use, whether it's a knife, which is a really good thing to learn, or the bevel cutter. All right, so my 4 walls, the vertical corners of my 4 walls all have a bevel. The next step in preparing to assemble this after it's beveled is I prep all of the joints by scoring and slipping. So a joint is going to be where the clay comes together. So such as a bevel is a joint, so all the bevels have to be scored. And also the bottom edge of the walls where it sits on the bottom. So I will score the bottom edge and then the top edge of the base. Bottom edge of the wall and top edge of the base. Scoring and slipping are absolutely imperative when you're building with slabs in this manner, especially for beginners. You don't want to sacrifice your piece by allowing it to crack and come apart. Now, everything has been scored. Now I'm going to slip. You could use either prepared slip, or you could use just water or vinegar. Sometimes I use vinegar. Vinegar has a little bit of an acidic reaction, especially if the clay is a little bit drier, but here I'm just using some water. It's actually my slip bucket water. Now everything has been prepped, scored, and slipped. I'm now building the walls on top of the base, not next to it, but on top, because I know those bevels should meet up and it should fit just right. After you put them on there, then you want to gently pinch the corners to help really embed those seams together a little bit. You could also then take a rib, kind of gently compress them together, but this is still not permanent. If I left it like this, it would probably dry and fall apart. Now I have some little maybe gaps in there, and I need to make sure that the corners are really well stuck together. So I'm going to add thin coils. These are going to be about pencil thick. The coils should always be the same moisture as the wall of the pot. You don't want to put real plastic coils on with drier walls. Just lay them in every single seam, bottoms and sides. The 2 tools that I recommend are both wooden Kemper tools. This one is the one that's kind of shaped a little like a pencil. It has a flat edge and a rounded kind of an end, good for smushing. And the other one is the wooden knife. There are varying lengths of wooden knives, but you want to use the rounded end with the outside edge of that where it's kind of rounded, and then blend with that. Now when you're blending your coils, always hold the outside of the wall so you don't blow apart the seam. But my goal is to blend the coil into the walls and the bottom so you don't see a visible seam of the coil at all. You want it to be completely embedded and rounded in appearance in there. And again, I find the tool, the rounded end of that tool, a little bit easier. Of course, you could use your fingers as well. Now, once you have it blended in there, you can tidy it up, make sure you're getting the edges. You want to go ahead and rib a little bit more aggressively on the outside of the corners. That's the nice thing about the tar paper. You can rib a little bit more aggressively, shave off some of the clay where it just squished out on the bottom there, and really make sure that the corners are embedded. Make sure, and you could use a tiny rib on the interior if you can fit your hand in there with a rib, or slide the stick sideways. Once it has been blended on the inside and the exterior corners have been ribbed together, and
you don't have gaps, it looks like it's solidly built, then you want to allow it to get leather hard. Typically, if we just flip it upside down in the glass stamp cabinet, that gets it leather hard. If you're storing it out, like at home or something, you can put a towel over it upside down. That will allow it to get leather hard typically. Review with the second box. I am beveling first, prepping all the corners, then score all the bevels, slip, and then build it on top of the base. Rib together, make coils, add the coils to every single seam, bottom and sides, blend with the rounded end of a tool. Make sure that the coils are fully blended into the sides and the base. Then rib together the corners on the outside, kind of aggressively, up against the tar paper, and refine the interior and the upper edge.
Okay, both of these are built. I'm going to let them get leather hard. Again, if we did it in a damp cabinet, I would do it like that. And I'll come back when it's leather hard and show you how the cleanup is done. Alrighty, now my little box has become leather hard overnight, and my goal now is to transform this into a nice clean box like this. We're going to use some tools that are familiar to you because we've used them before on the pinch cups. We're going to be using a Surform. We might be using a couple of the long Surforms if you want to. This one being the one that is straight across, this one being curved. This one is probably not as helpful for this because the box itself has straight corners and straight lines. If you were using a curved form or something that had a cutout like the pass-through on the one that I showed earlier, that curved one would be helpful. Now, when you begin taking the tar paper off, you want to be sensitive to how moist the wall is. If you are starting to take it off and you realize it's a little flexible at that point, then you might want to let it dry a little bit more. Mine is nicely leather hard though, and I can remove all of these pieces. Now, the first step that I want to do is I want to kind of true up the corners a little bit, because you can see maybe it's a little bit wavy, it's a little bit curved. I want to just true that up. I can either use, again, the small Surform, and remember these are built like a cheese grater, so they work when you pull in one direction. So as I pull, my goal is to try to produce some precision there with the corner. So I'll do all my corners like this.
So this part is, it takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth it. When you're using the shredder or the Surform, be careful only to be doing it on the corners themselves. My goal is to try to bring it to a nice crisp angle. Don't do it in the middle, because if you do it in the middle of the wall, it's going to thin it too much. In the middle of the wall, it's not lumpy. Once you have refined it with the Surform, then take a rib over all of the corners. It helps get rid of the Surform marks. And I am working on foam rubber, as you can see there. That helps to prevent me from denting or dinging up my bottom by leaning it on it. It just adds some protection. I have a towel over that foam rubber to help keep it clean as well. So ribbing is getting rid of all of the Surform marks as I go over the corners. Once I've done the outside, I'm ready to concentrate on the inside, and I'm just taking that side of the wooden knife and kind of scraping the interior, just trying to smooth it out to get rid of any dings, dents, tool marks that I might have in there, just to make it a little bit more even.
I have cleaned it up fairly well on the inside. There are some tool marks still. Now, if you are using a grogged clay, remember that you don't want to sponge grogged clay, but you could use a stiff bristled paintbrush with water on it and go over it, and that can smooth it to get rid of your tool marks. Again, the reason that you do not sponge a grogged clay is if you sponge grogged clay, you're going to take away the tiny particles when you sponge and leave behind the grog or the gritty surface, which is not going to be a pleasant surface and will be very noticeable when you glaze it. You only want to sponge clays that are without grog. That's why students, we were able to do it on our pinch cups that we did, that earthenware that I buy for us is without grog. And our themed coil pots, that is without grog. We were just getting ready to use our stoneware for the first time when classes were classes were canceled because of the quarantine and the virus. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I want to look at this top edge because the top edge is still kind of lumpy and uneven. One of the goals that I usually give people is try not to leave it a really sharp, precise corner like that. That has a tendency to get chipped. It's a little bit better, I think, if you soften it and just kind of round it. Let me show you a glazed one here. So even with it just softened a little bit, it gives you a little bit more durability on your edge. So to soften it, I could just easily take a rib and kind of just pull it across, and that will soften it. You could take a Sureform and pull it across and soften it a little bit. You could take the notched card that I've shown you all before, the notched credit card kind of thing, and pull that across. Now the trick is, if you use this, however, when you get to the corner, you can't follow through on the corner. So the corner has to be hand sculpted. So let me just show you here on a second side. Okay, you can see these two edges look like they match pretty well, except the corner doesn't match. So then you want to come in here and do a little hand sculpting to get that to match.
And the hand sculpting is just with a rib, taking a little bit off on the inside and the outside. And really look for the fine details of cleaning. I just saw that I had a dip in the edge, so I'm just straightening it with the Sureform, but then I'm re-rounding the areas that maybe I flattened. Fixing all the corners to make sure that they look uniform, that your rim has a uniformity about it, and thickness and angle, that sort of thing. And lastly, for the smoothing of it, I'm going to dip my fingers in water and compress it just like we've done on the pinch cups and the plates. That compression helps to smooth it without tool marks, and I'm also smoothing the corners with just a little bit of wetness on my fingers, a little bit of water to get it really super clean. And this part is a really abbreviated version of the same thing on the second box. Take the tar paper off, Sureform, or use the shredder on the corners, then ribbit, then smooth the interior, then sculpt the upper rim to make it uniform, clean up the inside with a tool and a brush, compress the rim with water in your fingers. And there are both of my boxes ready to just dry a little bit more before I do decoration.
Part of the important step of creating a piece is thinking about how you're going to address the surface. Are you going to put design on it? Are you going to leave it super smooth? Are you going to add, in the case of these couple, are you going to add texture to it and allow a glaze to really enhance and kind of pick up the texture? So there are many different options that people do. In the case of these are real simple designs where I've made it textural. So instead of just lines carved in, I have actually kind of rounded that design a little bit, or in the case of this, I made it kind of recessed a little bit and kind of come out and recessed and come out. Or in the case of something like this, these are similar to what we did with the concept of the drape molded plates, where we carved a design in and we literally just have the lines carved in, and the result of something like this would be something like this. So just like with the plates, it's a matter of glazing the interior line with, say, underglaze, and then glazing the upper part with whatever method works best for it. It could be, as I show in a glaze video, it could be bulb syringe, it could be brush, it could be dip, it could be pour. So lots of different options for glazing on that. If you wanted to do something that was more of kind of a scene, like your scene specific, you could certainly do that. Again, I just carved the lines, filled the lines with underglaze, and then I used Celadon glazes over this. A Celadon is a type of glaze that has a transparent quality to it, so you can still see through it. These are the Coyote Celadons that I have in my classroom. Let's see, that's Sapphire, that's Rainy Day, and then the trees themselves are Peacock. So, oh, I've got stuff in there, but that gives you an idea of thinking about the exterior. Now, when you're beginning to lay out the design, what I usually recommend is to lightly lay it out first. So here I'm making just a little jig with a couple of tools to make a nice, even, parallel line to the base. You can use templates, of course, if you want, like a straight edge, and you can use that to trace. I'm using the triangle tip tool, that Kemper tool that I've used on multiple examples in the past, that makes a really nice clean line that requires very little cleaning. And I'll just go ahead and kind of lay out, and I use that on the mountain one as well. And here I'm just using some templates and some various tools to help get my design the way I want it to, and I'm cleaning it off because as I'm carving with a ball stylus there, it leaves burrs, and then you might see me cleaning it off with a round end of a ribbon tool. And after you've cleaned the debris out of the lines, then you want to do the final cleaning with a small, wet, stiff bristled paintbrush. Just take that with water and go over all of your carved lines, and that will really smooth out and make sure you don't have any debris left in there. Now, one of the key things you want to think about, surface design, you want to think about a unity of your surface design. So as it kind of wraps the corner, you want to have a unity to it. Don't have it abruptly stop and start and have it change up from side to side. You want to have a unity. It's not that it all has to be identical, but it should be unified at the corners. This is one of the key elements that I'm trying to get across with principles and elements with you all with surface design, is to have a consistency where it feels like it belongs together. Okay, so hopefully this all made sense, and this is the slab technique with tar paper. So when some of you get into level 2, you'll know how this works. So if you want to utilize this method, you have it at your disposal. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep potting if you can.